and I have like
Welcome to MediaPath. I'm Fritz Coleman.
And I'm Louise Palanker.
MediaPath is your portal to pleasures. Reading, viewing, listening pleasures. Weezy and I peruse the entertainment landscape and make little discoveries that we enjoy recommending to you. But the best part of this podcast is our fascinating guests. On a really good day, like today, we have someone who is part of a cultural phenomenon on our televisions called The Waltons, where she played Mary Ellen Walton. Her life has been rich and full since The Waltons, and we'll learn all about it in just a few minutes. She's Judy Norton. Can't wait to talk about it. But first, Weezy, what do you have for us?
Well, first, you know how Cher and I are best friends and we do everything together?
I do know that.
So if you're not following Cher on Twitter, she is a ride. Cher is big on emojis, not so big on hitting the space bar. She frankly doesn't have the time. She's expressive, and she will occasionally tweet back to you. So here we have an exchange where Cher wrote, "Have you ever had a time when one huge problem follows another? When you're actually responsible for many lives at the same time, when someone disappoints you, someone betrays you, another rocks your world and not in a good way, then it finally all hits you. Explosion, kaboom. This has turned out to be a rough day, sad crying face." And I responded, "I wish I were emoji fluent enough to send you something soothing and healing. Let me see, maybe, yeah, dolphins and soup." And then Cher wrote back to me, at Louise Palanker, "Here's a few more." And then she just spilled out emoji confetti at me. And I feel like Cher and I are really have reached the next level of our relationship.
But you've been interacting with her for a while, right?
Well, one time I said something teasing to her about perhaps the malfunctioning of her space bar, and she wrote back, "I'm 78," whatever her age is. Cher is ageless, timeless. But Fritz, we promise that if you, our home viewer, review our show at Apple Podcasts, that there is every possibility that we may read your review right here on the show, and you have stepped up to the challenge, and we thank you. Now, Fritz is going to read excerpts.
Let's do it
from
now.
Reviews. This
is from Thank Evan. Don't miss MediaPath. This podcast from local legend Fritz Coleman. I added that, and the delightful Louise Palanker is so fascinating and fun. We got hooked when they did a deep dive with Bill Schnee, the music engineer behind such names as Chicago, Barbra Streisand, Whitney Houston, and many more. But it's not just music, but many ideas that fascinate from the two. Tune in. And the second one is from KTA.
It's Kathy Kulak. She's my college roommate. Go for it.
Oh, okay. MediaPath, informative, witty, and entertaining. Louise and Fritz amazed with their knowledge of books, movies, music, history, current events, entertainment in general. They are not only knowledgeable, but entertaining in their rapport with each other and their humor. Their enthusiasm is contagious, and I'm always learning something new. I feel like this is like a Tinder bio. I enjoy finding out what these actors, entertainers are doing now who have performed many years ago. I really enjoy the podcast with Anson Williams. Amazing to find out that his second cousin was Henry Heimlich and how he ended up on Merv Griffin. Interesting side stories like these keep the podcast entertaining and most enjoyable.
Thank you for reviewing our show. We appreciate you. So, Fritz, what have you been watching? Oh, am I going to go first because you have one and I have two?
I think
okay.
so.
All right. So I read a book called The Forest of Vanishing Stars by Kristin Harmel. Yona was stolen from her crib at the age of 2 by a mysterious old woman who lives in the woods and raises the child in the heart of the forest, teaching her its bounty, its dangers, and its secrets, and fully preparing her to one day sustain and guide a group of brave Jews through the terrors of World War II. They in turn teach her what it means to belong to a community. Inspired by the incredible true stories of Jews who really did survive the war in the woods of Poland and Belarus, The Forest of Vanishing Stars is a heart-wrenching and suspenseful novel from the #1 internationally best-selling author Kristin Harmel. And at the end of the book, Fritz, in the author's notes, she talks about a Facebook group called Friends and Fiction, which she leads with 4 other best-selling authors, Mary Kay Andrews, Mary Alice Monroe, Patty Callahan Henry. You need at least 3 names to be a best-selling author, Fritz. Christy Woodson Harvey and Kristin Harmel. The group description reads, "We discuss books, writing, and invite fabulous authors to join us, all while highlighting one independent bookstore each week. We invite you to post your questions for us or for our guests on our F&F page, and we will do our best to answer them. So join in the fun. Welcome. So if you are frequently on the hunt for your next great read, this is a wonderful group with loads of suggestions and conversations.
Very cool.
Yep.
Well, I'm doing a movie everybody's been waiting for, The Many Saints of Newark. And it's the prequel to the Sopranos series on HBO.
Oh, yeah.
It's the Sopranos backstory. It takes place in one of the most tumultuous periods in the history of Newark, New Jersey. It's about a young Anthony Soprano becoming a man, just as rival gangs start to rise up and challenge the all-powerful DeMeo crime family. This is early 60s. Parts of Newark burned as a result of racial violence. So it's race politics all mixed in with mob politics. Young Anthony idolizes his Uncle Dickie Moltisanti. His relationship with Uncle Dickie is what shapes him into the powerful mob boss we've come to know as Tony Soprano. Now, the most fun of this movie to me was Ray Liotta, for my money, one of our greatest actors, and he gets to play a pair of twins with lots of screen time in this. But this is the revelation. The young Anthony Soprano is played by Michael Gandolfini, who is the son of the late James Gandolfini, who was Tony Soprano in the series. And honestly, he pulls it off. The question that remains unanswered is, will there be a sequel or two to this movie, or will the movie set the stage for another HBO series? And as they say, nobody's talking right now.
Maybe they just go further and further back in time until we're in Italy. And it's like,
they could.
Forget this
like
place.
The Godfather.
Let's go to America.
Go to Sicily.
And break some limbs.
It was pretty good. I mean, it's violent, but it's interesting, and I just love Ray Liotta so much.
Yeah, he is great. I have one more pick before we get to
Let's
Judy.
do it.
This is called Acapulco on Apple Plus. You know, I'm a big fan of the Apple Plus streaming service. They have really good program. And they have programming that's low on torture, low on mayhem, and I'm a fan of that kind of stuff. So, unlike The Sopranos, no offense. In 1984, young and ambitious Maximo Gallardo lands the job of his dreams as a cabana boy at the glamorously posh Las Colinas resort in Acapulco, Mexico. He quickly learns that the position requires him to wrestle relentlessly with moral dilemmas and ethical quandaries, which will mold his character and impact the arc of his life. The 10-episode story unfolds as the fully mature and hugely successful Maximo conveys its twists, turns, and lessons to his 14-year-old nephew. The show is warm, fun, and funny, and, Fritz, it's bilingual, so you can practice your Spanish by trying not to read the subtitles. It's called Acapulco, and you will find it on Apple Plus.
My writing partners and I wrote a sitcom that had to be bilingual.
Okay.
And it failed miserably because it had to be American and Spanish.
Because you guys didn't speak any Spanish?
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Okay, here now is a lady that you know for her role as Mary Ellen Walton on The Waltons from 1972 to 1981. 9 seasons, 221 episodes. The Waltons was an American historical drama about a family in rural Virginia during the Depression and World War II. And then after that, Judy went on to become a very successful director and writer and producer and singer. She has her own YouTube channel where she often answers questions about life in the Walton family. She's got a web series right now called The Quarantine Bunch. She's also apparently an adrenaline junkie. She's into horse jumping, into skydiving, into skiing, and the much more sane tennis. We're so happy to welcome Judy Norton. Hello, Judy.
Hello. Wow.
So nice to have you here.
But it's bilingual tennis.
To that bio.
Well, there you go. Try to live up to some of the things I mentioned in the bio. Now, Judy, The Waltons was based on the book Spencer's Mountain by Earl Hamner, who grew up in Schuyler, Virginia at the start of the Depression. And a lot of these Walton tales were based on Earl's actual life or reasonable facsimiles, right?
That is correct. You know, I don't know exactly which stories or how much was based on real things, but occasionally he'd mention different people or circumstances that he based things on. And from Spencer's Mountain, which was turned into a movie with Maureen O'Hara and
James MacArthur.
And Henry Fonda. And then later he wrote the book, The Homecoming, which became the Christmas TV special, The Homecoming, which ended up sort of launching then the series.
And you got to meet Earl Hamner, correct?
Oh, yeah. He was around all the time. He was a creative consultant. He was a producer. He did all the narration. So he was there regularly. He oversaw a lot of what went on, and really kind of was the quality checkpoint on the show.
And I guess it was kind of like the Harper Lee scenario, whereas people knew that he was from Schuyler, and so it became like a tourist destination to go down there and see the house that was referenced in the Waltons, and they would meet people in the family, and they were very sort of forthcoming with their welcoming nature down there, and people would make pilgrimages down there to meet the family.
Yeah, he talked about how his mother, if someone would come and knock on the door, she'd, sit and have tea with them, iced tea, whatever, and would be very gracious and answer questions. I'm not sure exactly where the rest of the members of Earl's brothers and sisters, where they were exactly located and how many of them were still in the Schuyler area. We, as a cast, were invited there in the early 1990s when they turned what had been a community center. It had originally been the schoolhouse. It was literally across the street from where the Hamner house was and where they went to school. Later on, it became a community center. And then as economic hardship hit the area, someone local got the idea to turn that community center into a Walton museum. And we were all invited down for the opening of that. And that's really what put it on the map then, because thousands of people showed up for that. And then they would have yearly reunions there. And then it sort of expanded from there. There is now a replica of the Walton house that is John and Olivia's bed and breakfast, which sits right across the street from that museum. And people can literally stay in bedrooms that are recreations from the house. And the downstairs is eerily like being on the set.
Wow.
That's great.
It was like so deja vu. A number of members of the cast went and stayed there in the rooms for the opening weekend. And we sat in that kitchen and that living room and went, wow, this is like flashback time.
That is wonderful. Now, when you were with Earl Hamner, I know you were a kid for most of it. You went from like age 13 to age 23 on the show, correct?
Yes.
Did you ask him questions about the character that you were based on?
A little bit, but unfortunately, when we're young, we're not always smart enough to take advantage of the resources we have around us.
Isn't that
there
true?
were so many amazing people I worked with that now I go, what was I thinking?
I know.
I wasn't.
You were busy growing up.
I had these amazing people that had these incredible histories that I just didn't sit and pump them for fabulous stories. But
you don't know what you don't know.
Yes. I did get to meet Marion Hamner Hawks, who Mary Ellen was based upon a couple times. She was so gracious, so lovely, and I really adored her. So a little bit of interaction there, but not as much as I would have liked because she lived in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Describe Mary Ellen's character.
Oh, she was a tomboy. She was a rebel. She was a nonconformist. She was really very early women's movement, but she didn't know it. She just was determined that she didn't want what she saw as a traditional path for a woman. She thought it would be just uneventful to grow up and get married and have children and take care of a house. She wanted to be an actress or a tightrope walker or something far more worldly than what she saw as her environment growing up in rural Virginia during the Depression. So she was such fun to play, because of all of that.
How much were the characters based on you guys, your personalities as actors? Did it evolve in that direction, or were you all cast because you were like his siblings that you were portraying?
I think there was a combination. Originally, they were, because in the Homecoming, there was a whole thing about how there were all these redheads, and there were a few of us who weren't natural redheads that were hired. And fortunately, I was one of them. I remember going into this was for the Homecoming, and I remember going into that audition and wearing shorts and, like cutoff shorts, hair and pigtails, barefoot, t-shirt, and just with lots of attitude, and evidently Earl said when I came in, he was just like, that's Mary Ellen.
Aww.
So thank goodness. A number of the other actors, young actors, were natural redheads, and they did dye my hair for the Homecoming in sort of an auburn red. A number of them are natural redheads. So that was a story point. And I believe that it was kind of a mix. Like I was totally, as you read from my bio, into sports and adrenaline things. And so kind of the tomboy aspect came naturally to me. I was a wannabe rebel. I just didn't always have the courage to be as much of a rebel as Mary Ellen. So I loved playing the character because I could be all this rebellious character without the consequences I felt I would have suffered in real life had I been that rebellious. So I think a lot of the characters evolved from the natural characteristics we brought to the original audition. And then I think the characters grew based on a lot of what we brought to them. You know, John Walmsley, who played Jason, did really play the harmonica and the guitar and the piano and all kinds of other things. So that became a real story point for his character. And they sort of did different aspects of that they, I think, began to write for what we were creating with the character, as often happens with a long-running show.
I think you have to look at where these shows show up in American and TV history to understand their impact. For instance, the Waltons and Little House on the Prairie came after we had just been through the 60s. There was a lot of political and family discord because of Vietnam and everything else, and family discord because of the changing attitudes in the 60s. And these shows were like a touchstone. They would remind people what was important in life. It was like a safe haven for people who wanted to protect the structure of their family. Do you agree with that? I mean, it just seems like the shows that have a lot of impact sort of plug themselves into the history, the zeitgeist of the time.
I mean, I would certainly hope so. I know that at the time the show was being considered as a series, because it was not originally meant to be a series. It was just meant to be a Christmas TV special. Then what I had heard was that it was a time when the networks were getting a lot of pressure from the moral majority, and that the network basically agreed to put the Waltons on with the feeling that, oh, it's a nice little family show. We're getting all this heat about doing family programming. It'll last for, 5 or 6 episodes, and that'll be the end of it. And it was kind of like a throwaway. They thought, yeah, we'll show them that nobody really wants to watch this. That was a story I heard. Wow. And of course, It couldn't have been more false that the country completely embraced the Waltons. It was not necessarily so big a hit in some place like New York City, like big urban cities, but middle America and smaller, really family communities just embraced it. And the producers went to smaller towns and newspapers and took out ads and did interviews and articles and stuff, saying, please save this beautiful show and don't let it disappear. And that we went from our ratings in that first year, we were very low in the ratings. And over the course of this campaign of this whole first season, we rose to the top and ended up in, like the top 5. And we were number 1 for years. So the show found its audience, which shows don't have a chance to do anymore. And I'm so grateful for that structure that existed at that time with only 3 networks. That our season pickup was 26 episodes. Not like, let's do 3 and see what happens.
Right.
So we had time to find our audience and find our characters and that rhythm and everything that became the heart of the show.
Right.
But we had no idea the impact we were having at the time we were doing it. We were now in the 70s, so I was trying to be cool,
No, and I mean, that's another thing that you don't really know when you're a kid, and your main focus is just creating yourself. So how has your Walton childhood impacted your grown life? I mean, for us, taking in the show's messages and lessons was meaningful for us, for we viewers. But how did it impact the actors? Were you able to take that in as well, what the show was teaching us?
To a great degree, yes, because they were such beautifully written scripts that they raised questions about people and cultures and religion and points of view that the Waltons really represented a very open and compassionate. They would embrace people and strangers and ask questions, and they weren't biased or prejudiced. And so all of that were wonderful lessons to be surrounded by. But then I think even more than these stories at the time was the working environment, was working with the rest of this cast who we are like a family. So those relationships and the working environment and everything that went on, those things, hugely impacted my life as well. For someone who wanted to pursue a career in this business, to have that opportunity and to be doing that for 9 months out of the year, and all of what that meant, and then learning how that meant my interaction with people that saw the show went. So those things really build who you are as a person. And it still does, because the show has as much an impact now, it seems, as it did at the time. I mean, that's what I'm discovering with this YouTube channel of mine. Is I started it just for fun because I thought, oh, well, maybe I can share some things with the fans during COVID, and let them know how much we all appreciate, how much they love the show. And I hear all these stories of what the show meant to them, and so these relationships form. We have loyal fans that have been watching the show for 50 years, and they come to these reunions and they think of us as family. Mm-hmm. So all of that, I mean, you can't not have an experience from all of that.
Mm-hmm. What was your daily workaday life like for somebody your age, young, tween, and early teen? I mean, there's a lot of work in 26 episodes a year. And what was it like? Did you do on-set schooling and that type of thing?
We did during what would normally be the school year. So we were required by state law to have a welfare worker teacher on the set. And whenever school would have normally been in session, then we were required to do 3 hours of schooling a day at the studio. And we had teachers there. It was just for our cast, or if we had a guest star who was young enough that they were there for an episode and needed to attend school. During the summer, when you wouldn't be in school, we didn't have to do schoolwork. They were not allowed to give us homework. And if there was a day when you had a really heavy work schedule, you might not get your 3 hours, or you might get them in 20-minute increments between setups, okay, we've shot that, now we're going to relight and stuff and go away, and you'd get 20, 30 minutes of schoolwork.
What a horrible way to learn algebra. Oh my God. In 20-minute increments.
You'd be in the middle of something, it's like, and then you get called away. And we couldn't count it if it wasn't at least 20 minutes. So you might go in for 10 minutes and then they go, oh, we need you. So you couldn't count it, but you didn't get anything done. So it was piecemeal, but then you'd have days where you weren't really in scenes that day. So you'd do your 3 hours unbroken, and you'd put in extra time for those days when you couldn't get the 3 hours. But the teachers were wonderful. I thought it was a tremendous education because it was one-on-one. I was the only one in my grade. Mm-hmm. I was the only one doing those classes. So the things I needed one-on-one help with, I got. And that was not the case in public school prior to that. Sometimes you can kind of get lost and you don't always get the one-on-one help that you need. So I was very impressed by the whole system and the way it protected all of us and our education.
And it's impossible to measure what you were learning on that set with all those adult professionals that I wasn't learning in a classroom of other people my age, only talking to people who knew what I knew.
Absolutely. You are surrounded by people, and people in the entertainment industry can be some of the most fascinating people. They have the most varied backgrounds. And, Will Geer had a degree in botany, and, he could sit there and tell you the Latin names of all the plants and he planted that garden that was supposed to be the Walton garden outside the house. Will Geer planted that for real on the back lot of the studio. And so he was an education. He, would quote Shakespeare and Woody Guthrie and Mark Twain. And then when I either thought to ask or someone told me anyway, the stories I learned from people that had been in the industry for years and years. And I knew the 40s history from living it. I knew a lot of the historical events from doing episodes about them.
Right.
So those things just, don't really happen in day-to-day life. So I never felt like I was missing out by being working during. I thought I was getting the best gift of all, to be able to be pursuing what I loved instead of just sitting in school reading textbooks all day.
Do you still have a relationship with any of your cast members?
Oh, totally. All of them. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we talk regularly. Because next year is the 50th anniversary of the Waltons. We have been talking about different sorts of things that might enable us to celebrate the 50th with fans and stuff. And actually, one of the things that's going to be done next year is going to be happening up in Canada through Trafalgar Tours and Wendy Dunham Travels, and that we're going to do a travel with the Waltons, sort of, from Toronto into Niagara on the Lake and up, and do some events that the members of the cast will attend. So some of these things are being organized and planned, and next year is going to involve some of those. Let's celebrate the 50th of the Waltons, which is impossible for me to think with. It's it seems like yesterday. I'm like, I know I couldn't have been doing it that long ago. And but yes, so we're close. So, a bunch of us have been kind of getting to talking and Zooming and doing all kinds of things to figure out what we want to do for the 50th. And so, especially the younger cast, I mean, I'm going to be seeing several of them in another week or so for a personal, private family event, for one of the cast members and stuff. So that kind of stuff happens all the time, or we hop on the phone, or we Zoom, or,
siblings,
family.
Siblings for life.
We're stuck with each other.
I get it. And I think that the fans love hearing that as well, right? They love knowing that this was a tightly knit group of people who became siblings.
Which doesn't always happen with shows. And we didn't know how special it was until we started hearing that wasn't normal, that other casts, we all went to lunch together every day, the kids.
Fritz and I never speak outside of this room.
It's a very, very contentious relationship. It'll rear its ugly head during this podcast. But do you have a favorite emotional moment in the show, a favorite episode, a favorite moment that you had in your own performance that is your fondest memory?
It's so tough with, as you said, 220 something episodes. That's I know that certain things stood out. Richard's last episode, Richard Thomas, knowing that this would be the last episode, because we were so close. And it's like, wow, he's not going to be here every episode. He's been my brother for all these years, and he's not going to be there. So things like that. I remember them shooting that scene, and and just being really sad, because it's like we're breaking up the family. Mm-hmm. And some of the location stuff that we did. I mean, there were memorable things, like when we did the episode where the house burned, and we shot one Friday night, and there was fire coming out of windows, and family members were supposed to be trapped in the house, and those were just incredibly emotional to shoot because they felt so real. We knew we were shooting, but they just felt so real. And it was always so easy to do the show because they created such a sense of realism in the stories, and for the most part they were really beautifully written, so you just kind of had to show up and do it.
What do people most want to know? And I'm sure you've had a chance throughout your adult life to communicate with fans, but now that you have this YouTube channel, it seems like you've got this ongoing conversation. What do people most?
I do these Ask Judy segments where I just I go through the comments and I pull questions that, I think haven't already been covered or that interest me, or it's like, oh, that's different, and I'll take that up and I pull those questions, and then I put together a list of the questions and I do a segment and answer the questions. And I do those, every once a week, twice a week, I do those or twice a month, I do those sorts of segments. So one of the typical things I've heard over the years is, do we all really get along? Mm-hmm. That is a really common question. And people are always really happy to know that we are like a real family, and that we do stay in touch, and that we're close.
To continue along that thread, who were you closest with? Was it age related, who people were closest with, and who are you closest with now?
It did shift over the course of the series because of our ages. So early on, me and John Walmsley, who played Jason, and Eric Scott, who played Ben, we were the sort of the closest in age. We were like 13 and 15 in that area, mm-hmm. whereas the others were like, Mary, who played Aaron, was like 10. So the difference between 10 and 13 is more significant than the difference between 15 and 18. Mm-hmm. So as the show went on, then I became closer to Mary, and then Leslie Winston, who came in to play Eric's wife, Cindy, the three of us, and Cammie would tag along. She was still a little bit younger, but we'd let her join in sometimes. Yeah. She heard a lot of stuff beyond her years when she was still young, from not just from us, but from the adults too. And the adults felt a lot like there was that, for me, the sense of an age gap. It's like, it wasn't something where you as easily made friends with, because they still felt like adults and I still felt like a teenager. I was pretty close to Richard throughout because he kind of floated between those two. Mm-hmm. Ellen Corby gave me a lot of advice. Will Geer always had a lot of advice. I didn't always relate to him. He was kind of like this kind of, throwback hippie kind of a guy that I was like, I don't quite know what to make of him as a teenage girl, But I get asked about him all the time. Every time I went someplace, they were like, "Oh, Will Geer was here," and it's like, of course he was. He traveled so much, and he would always go out and meet people. He was very gregarious that way.
He still has that Theatricum Botanicum theater out in Topanga or Malibu somewhere, where they do outdoor theater performances.
Absolutely.
Still there.
And that's where he lived for, all through the Waltons. He lived on that property.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. There is a house there, and one of his daughters, a couple of his daughters still run, it's still family run theater company. Ellen Geer, his daughter's very involved. She directs a lot of stuff, as does one of his other daughters, and I think he has granddaughters who are part of it. So it's still there, and there's a Shakespeare garden that he put together there, and his ashes are there, and there's a bust memoriam to him, and so yeah.
You blossomed in many other show business areas when you retired from the Waltons, including being a really interesting writer, interesting in the body of work you've done, including a film that's been described as brilliant called The Inclusion Criteria. It's on Prime Video right now. Mm-hmm. And this is so interesting, I think, and very timely right now in this era of data-driven lives that we all live. A woman doesn't know if she's going crazy or she's being manipulated, which is just a fascinating topic. What is inclusion criteria? It's actually a technical phrase used by data people, right?
It is. I mean, it has to do with, the parameters of a study or something like that. What pieces are part of something, a study that you're doing, a scientific study or whatever? What do you include in it? What are those criteria that are included in it, in a sense? My husband works and, is more of a scientist. So I was like, honey, I need a name for this. And he threw that at me. It's like, what would you call if you were doing a study? He goes, like an inclusion criteria, anyway, he was responsible for that. And a lot of people were confused about it. So it got renamed at one point. So it's also is found under the title Nowhere to Hide. Mm-hmm. But yeah,
which won some independent film awards.
It did. Yeah.
Well received.
And it,
but do you find that, now with all the Facebook arguing we're doing right now, that, that whole idea of being manipulated by data and all that kind of stuff, it just seems to resonate right now.
Yeah, we call it gaslighting too. Yeah. When someone is made to feel like they're the ones that are going crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Well, in this particular case, the concept came to me because of something I read that was talking about actually in World War II, that experiments were being done with mind control medication drugs.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know if it was entirely true, but it was a really scary concept. And so I wrote this hypothetical thing about what if this kind of experimentation was being done and someone didn't know it was being done. And so she becomes a victim of this kind of experimentation. That's kind of a spoiler, but you can find out what goes on along the way. And it was interesting because at the original premiere, Michael Learned, who played my mom, Mama Walton, was there with her husband who served in Vietnam. Oh. And after they saw the movie, and I was talking to some of the reporters after, and I was talking a little bit about where this came from. And he goes, absolutely, that's true. And,
wow.
He talked about, from his experience in Vietnam, somehow being aware of, or hearing about that kind of experimentation being done. And so I felt like, there is so much in my opinion, over medication going on for all kinds of things that it scares me. And so the thought that something like this could go on, I thought, I'd like to shine some light on it and see. And,
that's so interesting, because what you say is true. And now, because of the Freedom of Information Act, we're finding out about all these LSD experiments that the CIA did on soldiers. We also know about the Tuskegee medical experimentation done on African Americans, which, as it turns out, in our current environment, is part of the reason why blacks are having a difficult time believing information about the COVID vaccine. So it's been harder to convince them to do it. So that whole thing that you brought up in that film is very, very current, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. I thought so. And so, I thought, what the heck? I wanted, if I'm going to do something, I wanted to do something that, was important to me. Because I feel like within this industry, we have that opportunity to have a voice. And so how you use it, can say a lot about, the direction you're going and the direction that things go. I mean, when you talk about the impact of the Waltons and what the impact that's had on the culture, and sometimes when I look at so much programming that's happening now, and I hear fans of our show saying that they just watch the reruns of the Waltons because they don't relate to or don't care for a lot of the programming that's happening now. And I mean, I would certainly love to see, a bit of a, renaissance within the entertainment industry. And, I think we've gone through the shock and awe phase of, let's see how far we can push the boundaries, but sometimes to take a look at, do these stories and do these messages really, are they important? Are they valuable? Or is it just an opportunity to express your own frustration or anger or whatever? And is that helpful to other people? I think that there is a responsibility connected with being in this business.
Well said.
When you have a public forum, and what are you doing with it? And I know we don't always have the same opinion, and people are entitled to like what they like and have opinions, but it's such an open, you talk about the technology and the data that's out there now, everything you say and do, can be seen and heard, and, people. So, I don't think I was always trying to tell younger people, beware, especially if you want to get into the entertainment industry, beware of what you put on your social media. Because if somebody contacts me and says, oh, I want to do blah, 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 and I'm considering using them in a project, I will look at their social media and see what they're posting.
Okay.
And if I feel like they're spewing a lot of hate stuff on their social media, I'm like, this isn't a person I want to be connected with.
Right.
So those things do come back, and people are looking. So beware of what impression you're putting out there. Yes. And is it the one you really want out there?
You brought up a really interesting point a couple of points ago, and that is that people find safe haven in watching the Waltons and reruns now. But if you look at it, that show was framed in the gloom and doom of the Depression and World War II, which kind of mirrors the political gloom and doom that we find ourselves in here. And what's proven in both eras is the family is all that's important. So you find safe haven in your family and having healthy relationships with those you love.
Not just the family too, Fritz, but the Waltons for me is about how we treat each other, the choices we make every day. Yeah. Because they're faced with all these challenges, the different people that they encounter, and it's how they consistently treat people. That's my takeaway about the Waltons. Go ahead, Judy.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think it sets an incredible example and one, as a role model of characters and family and all that. And right now, I think, people have gone through 18 months of confusion and resettling and change, and, to get back to more fundamental things in terms of, your family, your community, and those connections, and that, because that's ultimately the people you're going to rely on and that you're going to be there for. And I always loved that the Waltons they always supported each other. They were always there to back each other up. And that to me is a beautiful thing. And family can be the family you're born with or the family you create from the people that you choose to have in your life.
But an episode that you were looking at on your YouTube channel was, I think, called The Boy from the CCC. And he's this kid that his grandma doesn't trust him. And then, and you tell the story and you show little clips and then you say, that's another person whose life was changed for having encountered the Waltons.
Yeah. And the Waltons were impacted by the people they met. They learned new things, and their thoughts and minds were opened up to new things. John Boy learning about Hell's Kitchen was like fascinating to him. It's like, wow, that you could live in an environment where you didn't just have food available. You couldn't plant a garden. You couldn't go out hunting. Mm-hmm. It's like, wow, that you might feel that your only option if you were starving was to steal. That was a new concept to him, Right.
Yeah. There's a lot there. And I think there are good shows, as Fritz, you're talking about, comparing the time periods, but we do have so much available to us on streaming media. Maybe a lot of the focus goes to the shows that are more violent and the more exploitive, but there are good shows like some of the ones that we try to point out on our little podcast here that have good themes, good values, good messages. You just have to look a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's always things to find, and and people do have different tastes. Yeah. So I think right now there is that opportunity for people to find what appeals to them. And yeah, there's a lot of things that I'm really enjoying, and the way the industry has grown and what's available and from a technological standpoint within the industry makes it so much easier for this variety of stuff to happen. So yeah, people do just have to dig around and find the gems.
Mm-hmm. Now, Judy, I want to talk about a turning point in your career. This is a moment that you realized that you were on a lunchbox. Now, I'm sure that this was something that you thought.
And I am an action figure too.
Are you an action figure?
I am an action figure.
So here's the Waltons, and I guess you're birthing a calf, which Waltons are prone to do. And then here you are changing a tire. So it goes from, farm to technology. And I guess there's little pictures all the way around. Here's Grandpa getting a haircut. That was a key moment. So do you remember? But you were a kid. So do you remember when this happened? And if you ever saw a friend of yours carrying this particular lunchbox?
I did not ever see a friend carrying the lunchbox. I do not have the lunchbox.
Oh.
I do have the action figure, and I do have the game. There was not a lot of Walton merchandise.
What happens in the game? How do you win?
I'm not sure. I've never played it because the game that I had didn't even have all the
house fire.
Escape the house fire.
Exactly. And if you win, you get to pick the corn in the garden.
You get to name the calf.
Yeah. But yeah, it's quite something. And when a show like Carol Burnett did a spoof on the Waltons, and when Mad Magazine did a segment called The Walnuts, and when we were on the cover of the magazine, with a Norman Rockwell type Thanksgiving portrait. And so those moments are being thinking in terms of being part of television history is very humbling, and it's tremendous. We did a Q&A session at the Smithsonian with the Walton cast, and I think the radio might have been in the Smithsonian at some point. I don't know if it still is, but it's just like, I go about my daily life and I live a pretty normal life, and then something suddenly it'll be like, wow, I'm in a lunchbox. Or that show just made a reference to the Waltons in regards to something. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that must happen constantly, because just the awareness of how often somebody will say good night, Jim Bob, or Mary Ellen. They tend to say the names that have two, John Boy, Jim Bob, and Mary Ellen. Before they're going to remember Aaron or Ben, they're going to say your name probably. So you must hear it constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember one time during one of the space missions, and there was a headline in the newspaper. This was back when we had physical newspapers more, and it said, astronauts say goodnight Walton style. This was like, come on. It's like, how cool is that? I don't necessarily think that everybody's seen the show, but it is a part of culture, and people are usually familiar with at least some aspect, even if it's like, oh, well, have you heard pop culture references to Goodnight John Boy, Goodnight Mary Ellen and stuff. And typically, even if people haven't seen the show, they're familiar with that.
And they sure are. Yeah.
You're a big supporter of human rights.
Yeah.
Talk about that in your life, how important that is in your life.
Well, I mean, we're all people, and I think everybody has the right to, live their life under these various different human rights that exist. There is literally a proclamation that lists out people's human rights. And, it's just when you look around the world at places where people are not being treated that way. I mean, and that's something that we mentioned the Waltons, that, they always treated people with respect and dignity, and gave them the benefit of the doubt, and did their best to, even if somebody like the boy from the CCC, even if he wasn't initially someone they totally trusted, they still tried to help him. And ultimately they did. And so many people crossed through. And I think that, that the more we treat each other with humanity, it kind of, change starts with us.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to kind of think of a mob or a group, but that's a group of individuals. And if each individual takes it upon themselves to try to be a better person, and to try to treat other people better, and to try and understand somebody,
mm-hmm.
then, we can make a huge difference in the world. So I do, like I do what I can to support organizations that are, doing good work. And yeah, I mean,
you must get asked often to take part in this cause or that cause, and then you get to hand pick what it is that you're going to invest your time into. So what are some of the causes that matter most to you?
Well, I've been working most recently doing some handouts. Like my husband and I were actually just out over the weekend in a local community handing out booklets from the Drug Free World Foundation, and just that enlighten people about the truth about drugs and their effects and whatnot. And so I think drugs are still a huge problem in our country and around the world. So I think education makes a huge difference. So that one is important to me. I've also been doing work to help support the Actors Fund, because so many of my fellow actors and people in the entertainment industry and behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, on stage, have been really struggling and out of work for so long when everything shut down. So I've done some things for, there's a couple of gentlemen in New York who've been doing, these daily, for a year, they did daily podcasts, Zoom things to raise funds for the Actors Fund. And so the Waltons did a couple of those. I'm part of a group. There's a website called cameo.com where you can sign on, and any celebrity or personality that's registered, you can, for a fee, get them to send you, they shoot a video and it gets sent to you,
mm-hmm.
and you tell them what you want to say. So Richard Thomas had approached me. He said, "Do you want to do this? I've been asked to do it." And so I looked into it, and it was during COVID. And I went, well, I'm not all that interested in doing it, but I will do it, and I will donate the money. So all the money that I have made from doing those videos, I've donated to various different charities, and a lot of it's gone to the Actors Fund and, and various other human rights organizations. So.
Can you talk for a moment about your early childhood and the talent that you exhibited that compelled your parents to move you in the direction of becoming a professional performer?
Well, my mom had been an acrobat growing up in England. She grew up in England during the war, and she and her brother did this hand-to-hand balancing, this acrobatic act. My grandfather had been a gymnast. He had qualified for the Olympics on rings. And so from the time my mother and her brother were little, he taught them this acrobatic act. So she loved the entertainment industry. She grew up during the war watching these movies from Hollywood and was like, I want to go there. Not that she wanted to act, but she was just enamored of Hollywood. So she and my father ended up moving to LA just before I was born. She started singing professionally, and they got me and my brother and sister like doing little musical theater classes, whatnot. And we did some little recitals when I was little, and I just always loved it. So I was fortunate enough to get some opportunities. I did children's theater, and then I started auditioning for roles. And, I think with children, it's much harder to teach children how to, as performers, than it is that they have some natural ability that you can nurture and help grow. So, yeah, I mean, I think it takes a certain personality and character to be willing to get up and do all that and put your emotions on the line. And it was just something that was always enjoyable for me. So I wanted to pursue it. And my parents fortunately gave me the opportunity and supported me in, getting me an agent and taking me to auditions and all of that so that I could do what I loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are you working on right now?
I am finishing up post-production on a short film that during COVID, I'm part of a writer's group and we wanted to do something we could shoot during COVID. So I wrote this little piece. It's called Space Limbo, a group of travelers, each in their own little space pods going to different destinations for one reason or another. They want to change their life. And so it's a series of each of their personalities and what's going on with them and, their whatever quirks or personality traits or things they're running away from. So it's a little slice of life of their diaries as they travel through space. So that's a little short film I shot with members of the group, and we're editing it now. And so I'm going to throw it out to some film festivals when it's done. Also doing some writing. I have a couple of scripts that are with a new production company, and that's looking to find homes for them, get them produced, and then I'm doing my YouTube channel, and
awesome.
That takes a fair bit of time, as you know from doing your podcast.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with the production value on your YouTube channel. And how you go about getting all of those scenes from the Waltons and freezing the frames, and that's
my editor, man.
Wow.
It's actually my son does all my editing, but that's what he does.
Oh.
That's what so I early on I was doing it myself, and I went, this is like too much for me to try and do everything because I'm not good enough at editing. And so at one point when I was talking to him, I said, hey, could I hire you to do this for me? And he went, yeah, I'll do that for you. So he's been actually, getting to see a lot of at least parts of the show as well, which he's never really sat and watched the whole series or anything. And it's giving me a chance to revisit the show because I haven't watched most of these episodes in, 30, 40 years.
And same for me. And so what's interesting is that when you rewatch something after you've had more life experience and you've had your frame of reference shifts because the experiences that you've had have accumulated, and then you look at it again and you're kind of in awe in a different way than when you were watching it at 14. You kind of see it with more appreciation, I guess, for all of the values and so all the layers and all of the interwoven characters and storylines and what's tugging at everybody. Kind of like it brings it into like a sharper focus, I think. Have you found the same?
Definitely, because I'm further removed from, which is good and bad, I'm further removed from remembering the filming of it. Sometimes I wish I remembered more of the filming because then I could share more behind the scenes. But things I was like, oh yeah, I remember shooting that. But sometimes I look at it and go, I don't remember shooting this at all. But I know from looking at it, I can see the sets. I can see how the lights were. I mean, I know how all of that worked from doing it. But then I can just really get caught up in the stories and the relationships and watching the scenes that I wasn't even there for, and watching the relationship between the characters and how beautifully those were created. Watching Michael Learned and Ralph Waite do scenes together is just like brilliant. So I love all of that. And again, yes, because of now being an adult and having gone through life, because these stories are timeless. They were set in the 40s, but things that happen, it's like, okay, yeah, you change the clothes, change the hair, but it's the same basic things we're dealing with still. And so it is, I'm really, really enjoying and appreciating it so much for how good it really was and how special it was that we got to do this.
Yeah.
It's like I really noticed, like after I had my son, because I played a parent a number of times before I ever had a child of my own. And, I had my best sort of, okay, I think it would be like this. And I've seen parents, I've been a child. But then when I started playing a parent after having actually had a child, it was like, I was like, oh, I didn't have any idea, how deep those feelings and that protectiveness and all of that, how deep all of that goes as an actual parent. So I found a tremendous thing in terms of my acting to have that extra layer of reality.
Wow. Yeah.
Much easier to be a parent on TV. You get everything right.
And the kid goes home with other people.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, is there anything, I know you have judynorton.com and you have your YouTube channel, and we're going to put all those links in our show notes, and we're going to let people know where to find you. But is there anything else people should know about where to find you on social media, et cetera?
I predominantly, Facebook, Twitter, I'm on Instagram. I don't have a lot of time to get on any of them. So because the YouTube channel, probably if I have to carve out time, I will carve it out for that. So if people do have questions, they should put them in the comments of the YouTube channel, because that's where I'm most likely to see it. And, sometimes I have people leave me messages on other social media, and then, their feelings are hurt when I don't get back to them. And it's like, I'm so sorry. I just literally do not have that many hours.
No, you have a life. That's the whole point.
She has a YouTube channel. It's a full-time job. Right. I understand. We're going to tell people how to find our show, and then we're going to read our credits and thank you. And we really appreciate your spending this time with us, Judy.
Thank you so much, Judy.
You've been lovely, and thank you for your insightful questions and for your appreciation for the show. That means a lot.
Well, listen, if you enjoyed this episode of Media Path, it would help us to be more discoverable by potential new listeners if you leave us a quick review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're new here and this is your first time with us, check out our back catalog. There's binge-worthy stuff on there. Gary Puckett and the Cowsills and Keith Morrison and Henry Winkler and Mark Summers and the Livingston Brothers from My Three Sons, all kinds of stuff. We thank you so much for spending an hour with us, and we would be overjoyed if you took a moment to share your thoughts with us or recommend us to a friend.
We would love for you to join us online on Instagram and Twitter, where we are at MediaPathPod, and on Facebook, where we are MediaPath Podcast. You can find full episodes with all kinds of bonus visual content on our YouTube channel, MediaPath Podcast. We would love to know what media you have been enjoying, so you can contact us at our social media or email us at mediapathpodcast@gmail.com. We want to thank our wonderful guest, Judy Norton. Our team includes Dina Friedman, Francesco Demanda, John Maddox, Sharon Bellio, Bill Filipiak, Thomas Hubble, Mason Brown, and you. Our theme music is by me and John Maddox. I am Louise Palanker, here with Fritz Coleman, and we will see you along the media path.